call this meeting to order. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the City of Kingman City Council. Our invocation tonight will be offered by Pastor Rob Kelly, Calvary Baptist Church. I'd like to ask all of us to stand.
Vice Mayor, can we do roll call first?
I'm sorry, Annie. Yes, we need to do that. We do a roll call.
Thank you. Mayor Miles? Vice Mayor Watkins?
Here.
Councilmember Mello is excused this evening. Councilmember Nelson is excused this evening. Councilmember Samily?
Here.
Councilmember Scott Staley?
Present.
Councilmember Walker?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Clerk Annie. Appreciate
Vice
that.
Mayor, just a word on Councilor Nelson. Her mother passed, and so just be aware of that, and thoughts and prayers are with her.
Thank you, Manager Foggin. We appreciate that. Appreciate you mentioning that. Our invocation tonight will be given by Pastor Rob Kelly of the Calvary Baptist Church, after which we'd like to ask everybody to stand for that, and then also please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Father in heaven, we just thank you so much that you love us so much that you gave us your Son, the Lord Jesus Christ. Father, we thank you that he suffered and bled on the cross and that he shed his blood for our sins. That he was buried and risen again for the fact that we can trust in him and our sins forgiven. Father, I pray tonight for the city council members that you would give them wisdom and direction as they do the work business of the City of Kingman. Pray that you would just watch over them and continue to guide them. Father, we praise you and thank you so much for all you've done for us. And we pray for one that's lost her mom. Pray for her comfort. Lord, I thank you for just the way you're in our lives. I pray that we might trust in you, that we might, the world is spinning out of chaos and might realize that you have everything. We just look to you and trust in you this time.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The council may go into executive session for legal counsel in accordance with ARS 38-431 to discuss any agenda item. The following items may be discussed, considered, and decisions made relating thereto. First on our agenda, we have call to the public, comments from the public. Those wishing to address the council should fill out request forms in advance. Action taken as a result of public comments will be limited to directing staff to study the matter or rescheduling the matter for consideration and decision at a later time. Comments from the public will be restricted to items not on the agenda, with the exception of those on the consent agenda. There will be no comments allowed that advertise for a particular person or group. Comments should be limited to no longer than 3 minutes. Clerk Meredith.
Vice Mayor, we did not have anybody request to join us via Zoom tonight, and no written comments were received ahead of time. We do have one gentleman present that would like to address the council.
Okay. Mr. Robert John Douglas Anderson III, if you would like to come up and address the council. And Mr. Anderson, if you could pull the mic towards you and so we can all hear you, especially those online too. Thank you.
Can I press the button?
Nope, you're good.
Good afternoon, City Council of Kingman. I've been hearing that there used to be a roller skating ring in the airport, and I thought it'd be a nice thing to bring it back with a fun center and having like RV parking for visitors to come in and join together and meet their neighbor. Mostly to meet people as Kingman's growing and being a bigger city. It's expanding so much with so many people coming in and the new home establishments. And I think it'd be a great idea to join together and meet people. I'd also like to say the need for water haulers, a rental system for the public and the residents to haul water for projects, and people live off-grid, instead of having to pay the high amount of money for water deliveries from the independents. So that was my second idea. I have 2 photographs that I'd like to introduce to help fund my ideas.
Actually, Mr. Anderson, if you'd like to, sure, that'd be great. Okay.
You can sell copies of them to help fund the roller rink
Oops,
and the water.
it's touching the mic, Mr. Anderson. There you go. Thank you. If you could give those to our city manager, and, that would be great. And I'm sorry, I will let you continue. Do you have anything else?
I've been a resident, Kingman, for about 6 years. I've been a resident of Arizona since 2007. I had a lot of disabilities to start with, but I'm doing better now, so I think I can rejoin the residents and community with a positive attitude to meet people. So I think it'd be nice to have a place to join together and meet your neighbor and have some fun.
Those are important things. Okay. Thank you for your comments. If you could give that information to the city manager, and he heard your requests and ideas, and we can present that to city staff. Thank you. Having no other public comments, we'd like to move on to our consent agenda, which is item number 2. All matters listed here are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Mayor and council members, have we all had a chance to take a look at the consent agenda? And are there any things that need to be pulled and discussed?
Vice Mayor, I'd like to pull item G.
Item G. Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Okay, hearing no other request, I would like to have a motion for the consent agenda for items A through H, but not item G.
So moved.
We have a motion. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Mayor Miles, item G.
Okay, item G calls for a plan to identify and evaluate water drought countermeasures and establish an implementation strategy and set management goals. The reason I pulled this is because really I just wanted to ask Manager Fagan and perhaps Director Owen, if he's there, if this is associated with the growing smart, water smart workshops that staff have just been part of and participating in with the Sonoran Institute. And so I'd just like to comment on that and also thank the staff for their very keen dedication to that project.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Miles. Our Public Works Director, Rob Owen.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, we had planned on submitting this grant before we had participated in the Growing Water Smart Workshop. It was one of our recommendations coming out of the Growing Water Smart Workshop, but this is a program through the Bureau of Reclamation that we've been researching for a while, and this is one of the grant opportunities that is available to us and will help us fund further drought mitigation plans and stormwater recharge efforts. So. with that, I can try to answer any questions anybody might have.
Okay.
Well,
Mayor
Vice
Miles?
Mayor, I just wanted to reinforce that this does align with those workshop objectives, and I want to express my appreciation to Rob and the whole team for going the distance with that workshop. It was several days.
Thank you,
Okay.
ma'am.
Thank you. I actually, Mayor, along those lines, because you asked me to attend last week the Mohave County Water Authority meeting, which sort of goes in line with some of these issues, the smart water resources and the drought contingency plan. There is major concern among all three cities about the Colorado River, the water, and of course, we have our own concerns here in our area up in the high desert. And so I appreciate you bringing attention to that and the fact that we really need to start working on water conservation ideas. So, thank you, Rob. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And with that, I would make a motion that we approve item G of the consent agenda.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Number 3, item 3, old business, we have none. New business, we have none. So number 5, department reports, and we will turn the time over to Manager Foggin.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I've got a couple of items I'll be talking to you about tonight. I apologize up front for the length of this survey report, but this is important. And so in doing so, I'm going to just brush across the highlights. The survey itself was made available to everybody through the council packet. So if you've read it, let me just apologize up front that I will be kind of going over some of the highlights that you've already read. We will also do a press release that will go out tomorrow, basically letting the community know it's available on our website for review. With that, just an introduction to the survey. Community surveying is extremely important and something that we've started doing back in 2018. And this is actually our third survey with the National Research Center. The reason that we continue to work with the National Research Center is that we get to ask the same questions year after year. It gives us that ability to benchmark. It gives us the ability to compare to other communities across the nation. And so I think, NCR is now currently working with over 600 communities across the country. And so we have a really great opportunity in which to compare, set benchmarks, not only with ourselves, but with others. And then, of course, the data is gathered to help us shape our strategic plan and actions that are needed to carry out that strategic plan. We actually use the information to help us with our budget decisions. And of course, one of the more important things is to help us track service delivery and our performance measurements in our service delivery. The survey that we use has focuses, just general areas of focus: the economy, mobility, community design, utilities, safety, natural environment, parks and recreation, health and wellness, and education, art, and culture. I think it's probably worth pointing out before I go too much further that we understand that there are some of these things that we do not control, but we're always looking for opportunities to help our partners. Education is one of those. Our health providers are another one, and they're actually covered in our strategic planning as well. So the 2021 Citizen Survey, we sent randomly selected 2,535 randomly selected citizens received the survey. We received 429 completed surveys back. The result is statistically significant, 95% significant, which is pretty much the best you can do on a survey. and it represents geographic as well as demographics of our community. So not one particular voice was louder than others. So it wasn't 35 to 45-year-olds telling us something. It really was random, and it was done so that we heard the voices of all of our community based on their demographics. Survey highlights. So in the report, at the beginning, you'll actually find these, and it just really is a brief explanation of how we compared to other communities across the country, as well as how did we compare to ourselves over the last 4 years. So the first one I wanted to cover is, while the mobility aspect, residents continue to have this be a top priority. This category didn't change very much from the last 2 surveys that we have done. So as I said, we remain pretty stable in this area. At least half the residents of our community said that mobility by car continues to be pretty easy in our community, and also walking. A third of the community weighed in saying that the ease of using our public transit, the CART system, is something that is working for them, and it's all we compared pretty much to the rest of the comparison cities that do the survey. Traffic enforcement was 46% excellent or good, street cleaning 37%, and street lighting 34%. These were about the same as they've been over the last couple of surveys, but are lower than the benchmark cities that we compare to. Continuing with mobility, as far as traffic signal timing and sidewalk maintenance, received pretty positive scores in our 2021 survey. And in contrast, our 2019 survey had our transit system higher than they do now. Now, I will point out that the number of people using transit has gone up. So that's not really super surprising. Through the pandemic, you'll recall that we offered bus rides for free, so we saw a ridership increase. So we actually had a larger number of people participating, which have never experienced riding the bus in the past or CART in the past. And also there was some policies in place that we know that some riders didn't care for, but because we're federally funded, we had to basically enforce some stuff that people didn't care for. So we weren't overly worried about that. We believe CART itself is doing an amazing job. When asked about priorities for mobility, nearly 95%, I'll get into more detail on this later in the presentation, but 95% of the residents indicated that maintaining and improving streets was essential or very important to this community, and we couldn't agree more. Furthermore, 3/4 reported that they were strongly or somewhat supportive of an additional property tax as part of this pavement preservation or having a pavement preservation program. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit more in the presentation. So community design, also a hot topic item for citizens. Ratings within the community design for livability tended lower than the national benchmarks, indicating potential for growth. And so one of the things that I wanted to point out is one of the things that we've done since 2019 is put in a new development code. Obviously, the new development code is designed to directly address this. And of course, we don't have very many months under our belt with the new development code, as we just adopted it in May of 2021. So we don't even have a full year with that. And when this went out, we certainly didn't have. This went out in November, so we'd barely been using it for 6 months. So roughly 7 of the 10 residents gave high marks to their neighborhoods, which is, I think, great news. And so I would say that our citizens enjoy their neighbors and in their neighborhoods, and which is something we always look at, along with safety, which we will talk about in just a minute. About 4 out of 10 offered excellent or good ratings to the overall quality of new development and public spaces where people spend time. Again, we've had a lot of growth, a lot of people moving in, and so there's some things we'll talk about with regards to that, which I think is this piece. I believe that our development code will actually address, and so a third or fewer respondents were favorable about well-planned residential and commercial growth, well-designed neighborhoods, and a variety of housing options. We all know that we've been struggling with the idea of increasing rental price or rental properties, the lack of rental properties, and also the increase in just single-family homes. And so overall, appearance of the community continues to be a concern, and it's something that we've had in our strategic plan. We are still working on projects to address this, and it's our belief and feeling that as we continue to do those projects, that these scores in this area will improve. The availability, I just talked about this, is that housing variety and options have dramatically decreased, and the respondents indicated that it's an important area for the city to focus, which again, we totally agree with. And then the final thing on this section is that when asked to consider potential projects and priorities for the city over the next 5 years, at least half the residents were favorable of increasing citywide beautification efforts and improving aging city facilities at 59 and 56%. So, city utilities infrastructure is highly valued. Of course, people are concerned about sewer, water. We actually ask about power and do you have access to internet, those kind of things as well. Obviously, we don't control the power or the gas, but when asked about this for the community and what the community should be focusing on, residents, of course, 85% wanted to make sure that overall utility infrastructure remains as a priority. I think we've had that as a priority as a community, so we're happy to see that the residents want that as well. Many city services received high marks from our residents. Garbage collection at 81%, excellent or good. Our sewer services at 69%. Utility billing, what happens right here in this building, 65%. And drinking water at 58%. Really, actually, they are on par with our comparison communities across the nation, and several of these scores are up, which I will talk about in just a minute. And then 71% of the residents indicated that addressing stormwater runoff should be a priority, and it's something that this council has been talking about, and we will be continuing to talk about how and where we can do that. Our residents love the natural environment, the high desert area in which they've moved or where they live or have lived. 6 of 10 surveyed favored the overall quality of Kingman's natural environment. And then a majority were also pleased with the community's parks and the availability of parks and walking trails. But we want to be careful with that, as they're happy with it, but the next sentence tells you that we're falling below the benchmark of what other communities, the comparison communities are seeing. So just means that we need to look for additional opportunities for parks, recreation, and hiking, biking activities, which I think we are. Significant improvements this year over the 2019 survey had us with our preservation of our natural areas, which is wonderful, something that we have been concerned about. 3/4 of those surveyed indicate that the natural environment should be an area of focus over the next couple of years. And when asked to consider importance of addressing a variety of potential projects and issues over the next 5 years, many residents prioritized expanding water conservation efforts. I love that, right on the heels of the conversation we just had about being water smart and about applying for grants that will help us do water conservation. Another one that was on the consent agenda was a grant for smart meters, which will absolutely reduce the amount of water loss in our system. So we are headed in that direction and hearing that, something that we've been talking about since I've worked for the city, and happy to see that the residents recognize that as well. Another item, although just under half the residents identified an increased number of walking and biking trails as a high priority, 61% said that they would strongly or somewhat support an additional property tax to fund that. Again, we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. So I just wanted to kind of show you what the breakdown and some highlights in these different categories were. So quality of life, this is what the pie chart looks like. So the overall quality of life for our 2021 survey showed that folks are rating us about midpoint. Obviously, we would like to see this increase, and that has been part of our strategy. One of our main strategic goals and actions is actually to address this item. So I don't have any highlights in that category because it remained pretty stable from 2019 to 2021. So really no changes from previous surveys. Our governance, overall confidence in the Kingman government, it looks really low, but that's really how people are feeling about government across all aspects of government. And I would say that scoring fair, good, and excellent at over 60% is something that we obviously always want to work on, but I'll show you some highlights in this category that I think are pretty promising for what we're doing as far as governance. So governance highlights the overall customer service by Kingman employees, dramatic increase. This is on purpose, really. We do customer service training yearly for our employees, and we were really excited to see 68%, which is 11% increase over 2019. Public information services, again, we've spent quite a bit of time and effort putting information out, improving websites, information in our social media, as well as trying to get good press releases out, and you can see that that is having a positive effect. And then treating all residents fairly. Another one that I think is something to be proud of, up 5% and up to 43%. Obviously, we know and understand that in all of these categories, we want to continue to see a positive trend upward. And then finally, if you were worried about how we were doing, well, 51% versus 26% on the federal government comparison. So although we want to see that much higher, we are doing much better than our big brother. Used on purpose. So economy, so health of the economy is another focus area, and 30%, obviously, we would like our residents to have a stronger opinion on this. Obviously, we believe that the work that we're doing on both Kingman Crossing and the Rancho Santa Fe TIs are an important part of this, and we have seen, and the residents recognize, that there are some new businesses in town since the 2019 survey. I think you'll see that in the highlights. So the overall economic health increased. Obviously, as I said, we want to see that be much higher, but that is a 4% increase in that. And then the overall quality of businesses and service establishments, a big increase here. Obviously, we've seen improvements at the old Kmart building that had been empty for quite a number of years, thinking that we're seeing some kudos from the citizens there. Obviously, as we continue to look to attract, expand, and retain businesses, we hope to see this number grow as well. And then just economic development, again, I pointed out at the beginning of this category that it's not very high, but we are seeing improvements in this area. Mobility. So again, mobility, we've covered somewhat already. Some highlights for mobility is that residents are seeing our effort to keep streets swept and clean at pretty substantial increase there. And then I wanted to make sure and point this out and give kudos to Rob and Jack and their team for, because we have been working a lot on timing of our signals. You all have seen the work that we've been doing on Stockton Hill Road and the efforts with the traffic signals there. Anyway, big increase in traffic signal timing, so basically telling us that people are feeling like the time spent at a stoplight isn't overly burdensome. Obviously, none of us like stoplights. We'd all like them to be green and when we got to them, but a pretty substantial increase there. Community design, we've talked about this. We, again, hope to see improvements in this area with as we continue to move through our new development code. There were no real highlights in that category, that everything had remained pretty much stable, and so nothing really to report on that. Utilities, the overall quality of our utility infrastructure, again, it had some pretty good highlights that I wanted to talk about. So drinking water, quality, we asked that question. Obviously, we have amazing drinking water quality, but folks may not pay attention to the reporting process, but we're up there, hope to continue to do some public education and hope to have that score increase. Our service for sewer increased way a great deal. I'm not exactly sure why. It went away. Sewer went away. That's always a good thing. So increase in sewer services. Stormwater management is way up as well. I always point out that this category tends to follow monsoons. So in 2019, we'd had some pretty big water in 2018, and so pretty low score, but we were happy to see it increase. Obviously, we've got some projects and making some efforts to improve stormwater and the way we're managing it. So we're hoping that we can keep that score going up. And then I wanted to just kudos to our utility billing folks. They're up as well and have been, bless you, and we have been increasing over the years. That's Tina and her team. So then on feeling safe, the overall feeling of safety in our community is strong. I will say that people feel extremely safe in their neighborhoods. And then the highest rated service, this will go to Chief Yeager and his people's heads, but they continue to be the top service as far as getting the most kudos from the citizen survey and the residents. So congratulations, Chief and team. The natural environment, we talked about the high desert beauty. Our residents recognize that. And there was the preservation of natural areas. So as the community has developed, we've been able to keep that natural beauty. People are seeing that. Really a big increase from 2019. Parks and recreation. So our overall quality of parks and recreation, pretty strong score. Not really a lot of changes in the survey results, so no overview of any or no highlights to review with you there. Health and wellness. Now I will say that this is one of the areas that we don't directly control for the most part, other than providing recreation and outdoor activities. But there are a couple of highlights. In our strategic plan, we had actually said that we wanted to continue to partner with KRMC, our health provider, in an effort to attract and have great medical facilities and providers. So health services, pretty big increase. Actually, I thought when we sent this survey out that through the COVID and through, just the difficulties we've had over the last couple of years, that we would see a decrease in this. Actually, we saw a pretty substantial increase in health services and availability of affordable quality health care, another increase. So congratulations. We will continue to partner and help where we can as a city on that. Obviously, we do not have direct control over that. And then availability of preventable health services, again, a large increase. So we're pretty happy. Obviously, that goes to our livability aspect of our community. Education, art, and culture. Again, we contribute a little bit to this, but not a whole bunch. We would like, obviously, to continue to be a partner in this area. There is one highlight that I wanted to point out, and that was the adult education opportunities way up, which is suggesting that MCC, who has been a great partner to us, and I would say that Gary Kellogg, his team, city manager's office, all work with MCC in an effort to try to encourage people to get education. I think moving down a part of their campus to the downtown area has a big part in this as well, is that there's a lot of people that have lived in this community for a long time that didn't know that we had a community college. It's hard to believe, but when they're out on the edge of town, and weren't saying much, they didn't have a strategic plan. They now have a strategic plan. They're visible in our community, and I think this graph really shows that. Inclusivity and engagement. Again, this I thought maybe a little bit lower because people had been shut in and they've been withdrawing. We've had a hard time getting people to volunteer, and so I was pretty worried about this. There's had some definite highlights. Sense of community is way up. And my hope is that as we have more people, as the new people have moved in and they learn about the community, that they get involved in the community and they come out to events. There is a whole bunch of events that happen in this community, and there's absolutely no reason to not have a sense of community. You just got to come out of your house to do that. Neighborliness of residents way up as well, which we're really happy about. And I think part of this does have to do with the pandemic, and people had a need to rely on their neighbors and found out that their neighbors were pretty nice people. So we're encouraged by that. So the last part of this presentation is on the survey, we get one page where we can ask specific questions that we are interested in. And so in 2019, we asked these very same questions. And so we thought that they continued to be relevant and important. And so we wanted to ask them again. So we asked them to please indicate how important, if at all, each of the following projects or issues are and will be for the city to address over the next 5 years. We've talked about streets already, improving the streets, 96%. That's a huge score. That's pretty, anything over 90 is pretty much, I would say, unanimous. And then that's followed not too far off by expanding water conservation efforts. We've talked about that. And then increasing youth and adult recreation program offerings. Now, the interesting thing about this, and something that we've been talking about for the last couple of years, is it's not just about outdoor activities. It's about what can we offer indoors. And so part of our 5-year capital plan has included a community center that facility would provide the opportunity for a much greater opportunity to expand both youth and adult recreation programs as well. And then the the one you can't see because there's a thing in the way, but addressing stormwater runoff, and we talked about that as well. So I just wanted to show you quickly what the breakdown looked like. So maintaining and improving streets. I don't think I've ever seen this. 0%, not at all important in a survey. Everybody that took this survey, all 400 plus residents, said that it was at least somewhat important. So essential and very important equate for 96% of those that took the survey. Water conservation, next highest. Again, very, very big numbers and something that we are working on. The youth and adult recreation, again, very small number of people, 3% was actually smaller in the not at all important. That's 3% is actually smaller than the water conservation at 5%. So that is a very important subject for our residents. And then stormwater, again, not at all important, very, very small percentage there. So I think that's something that as we concentrate on and work on, we can know that we're doing what the citizens are concerned about. Final one that I want to just talk about is our citizens pretty savvy about understanding our tourist economy. And so, although not as high as the other categories, I was actually surprised that this was as high as it was, because it is a really important part of what Gary and his team do. And it is also something that we're concentrating and talking about almost on a daily basis. So, and then the other customized question was, how much would you support or oppose an additional property tax as a funding source for the following city projects, taking into consideration that the average annual property tax increase would be about $150 per 100,000 of home value. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, at 78% for establishing and maintaining a pavement preservation program, scored really, really well. And the others actually scored pretty high as well. I mean, anything that's above 60% is a pretty high score. That is and I think I mentioned that improving and expanding public safety and city facilities, and expanding and enhancing city parks and sports fields came in second and third on that. And then this is the breakdown. I just thought that this would be important to show you, because as you look and as we talk about funding opportunities, I know the council, we talk about this, and we have talked about this pretty consistently since 2019. Strongly support at 36% is the highest we've seen. I think this is the highest we've ever seen. And then the somewhat support at 42%, again, very, very high. And opposition to that, very, very low. So, and the breakdown on the rest of these, again, clearly not as strong. But again, the opposition trails the somewhat support and strongly support by quite a bit for those other two categories, the parks and the public safety and city facilities. And that is the end of the citizen survey. As I mentioned before, we'll do a press release. All of our surveys are available on the website, and that's what I've got for you tonight on the citizen survey. So I'll take any questions you may have, or sit down and be quiet.
Thank you, Manager Foggen. Questions from council?
I did have a comment.
Is your
Not,
mic on?
uh-huh.
Okay. Just not hearing. Go
I'll
ahead.
speak louder. I wanted to first of all thank the citizens that responded.
Yep.
to the survey, because that is very important to us as a council. It's very important to city management. So I really would like to encourage, when you get the citizen survey, that you participate, because that is a true reflection of what our citizens want. And I really appreciate the presentation and all the information, especially going into our strategic planning that we're going to be doing. So I know we're going to be talking about these topics and expanding upon them. So the tax and the property tax, and then an additional tax. I was very surprised to see those numbers, but highly encouraged.
Yep.
So thank you so much. I appreciate that, and thanks to the citizens for
Yep,
participation.
Very much so.
Any other comments? Manager Fagan, once again, thanks, and I echo Councilwoman Samley about our citizens participating. And I do find it interesting about maintaining and improving streets, 96%. That's pretty strong.
Yeah, that's the highest score I think I've ever seen on any survey, and I've been doing this since 1999. So
And then I did the math, and of course, it's about 17% participation, and you said that is higher over previous years?
So in a statistically significant survey, what you're looking for is basically a 5% plus or minus is the best that you can do. The 429 participants are that's the highest number that we've ever had participate on the survey. But basically, when you hear 95% confidence or a plus or minus 5% could be wrong, what you're basically hearing is that those numbers can be trusted, and that if you were able to survey every resident in the community, the answers that you got from every single resident would be no different than plus or minus 5% of what the numbers you just saw. So
Okay.
you can be really confident in the numbers that you got.
Great, appreciate that clarification. Okay, moving on to item 5B, Tourism Economic Impact Report. Josh, welcome.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Mayor, members of council. Clerk, is this on the desktop? Good. Okay. Yes.
Aaron's going to pull it up for you.
Thank you.
There you go.
Oops, I'm sorry, Aaron. I was trying to put it to full screen there. Control L it. Okay. Am I going to be able to push through these, or is he?
You can either scroll with the mouse or
Or arrow down? Okay. All right.
you can use the arrows up in the top menu. So if you
Okay, we're going to scroll down. Members of council, so this is a study that was offered as part of the Arizona Office of Tourism Rural Marketing Cooperative Program. Dean Runyon and Associates is the group that conducted the study. They're a nationally recognized in the travel industry, conducting travel and tourism research and economic impact analysis since 1984. We participated in the study to understand what the impact of the pandemic was to Kingman. This can help us develop a recovery strategy and apply for post-pandemic recovery grant funds. So I'm going to be sharing the findings. This is more or less raw data. I'm not going to have the insights that Manager Fagan had. On page 6, this is the overall summary. The COVID-19 pandemic caused global economic hardship, particularly in the travel industry. It was hit harder even than it was in the Great Recession. U.S. travel spending declined an estimated 36% in 2020 compared to 2019. For Arizona, it contracted 41.2%. Kingman, it contracted 24.5%. Not showing on here, I was recently at the Go West Summit. Internationally, tourism GDP declined 42.9%. Looking a little bit into the numbers, so this looks at Kingman travel spending. It declined 24.5% from 2019 to 2020. Total spending, $110 million in 2020, was slightly less than $117 million in 2016. So we're seeing about a 5-year lag. Direct travel generated earnings declined 9.1%. Earnings includes benefits, payroll, as well as proprietor earnings. Direct travel generated employment declined 17.7%. That was about 260 jobs. Those were already, you can see, in 2019, dropping a little bit, and likely that is due to a restructuring out at Grand Canyon Resort Corporation, Grand Canyon West, where the Skywalk's located. Oops, I think I moved a little far on us here. Getting used to their system. In these charts, you'll see the green lines are 2019, the gold lines are 2020. Kingman's largest loss occurred in accommodations from 2019 to 2020. It was about a $9 million loss, or 28.9%. Visitors who stayed in a hotel, motel, or that's short-term vacation rentals such as Airbnb or Vrbo, that declined about 32.4%. And those visitors who stayed in a private home, such as with friends, relatives, spent about 222 million, representing a 13.5% decline. So we definitely saw a larger decline of those who were paying to stay at our hotels, motels, and accommodation versus those who were staying with friends and family. Visitors who stayed at a campground or second home saw no decline, and day travelers saw a 10% decline. So there was decline in day travel, but nothing like we had with our people who were staying in accommodations. As mentioned, the total direct jobs loss was an estimated 260 jobs. Accommodations and food service by far had the highest impact, with a decline of 190 jobs, and then that was followed by arts, entertainment, and recreation, a loss of about 70 jobs. No loss in the retail or other travel sectors. Direct travel spending detail. So this is displayed in the millions of dollars. The top chart breaks down destination spending from other travels, so it takes that out, such as arrangement services, that's your online travel agents, Priceline, Hotels.com, any of those fees in there, or ground transportation to destinations outside of Arizona. So we're taking that out, that's the other travel on the second line, and then we're going to take the destination spending, the first line, and pull that in and drill down in the second two charts. So the second two charts shows the same dollars, except it's dissected by, in the first one, by how they were staying in Kingman, whether it's by hotel, motel, or short-term rental, private home, campground, second home, or day travel. In the second sector, it's breaking it down by how they were spending their money, with accommodations, food service, food stores, gas, arts, entertainment, retail stores, that sort of thing. So overall, this is kind of getting into the weeds, but it's useful for us when we're evaluating the impact of events or travelers coming in. This is good data for us to look at when we're trying to figure out what the impact is when people are coming into the community. And the earnings, employment, and tax revenues. This is a recap from page 6. You can look at retail and other travel. That's the one bright spot. That's this line right in here. We actually had a 6.6% increase from 2019 to 2020. Employment, arts, and entertainment, recreation experienced the highest hit. Likely, once again, that was with Grand Canyon West. A lot of people were not working out there. They had reduced hours and reduced services. And a lot of those that are employed out there live in the community of Kingman. This is kind of a little bit busy, page 12. I'm going to go to the next page because it's the same data just in chart form. It'll be a little bit easier to look at. This is Arizona's trend. It does say Kingman up here, but that's not Kingman. This is Arizona. The largest loss occurred in Arizona in the food and beverage service. There was about a $1.9 billion loss from 2020 to 2019. That was 36%. Arizona visitors who stayed in a hotel, motel, or short-term rental spent about $6.8 billion. That was a decline of 41.2%. Compared to Kingman, Kingman had a 32.4%, so Kingman fared quite a bit better off than the state as a whole. Arizona visitors who stayed in a private home with friends and relatives spent $2.4 billion. That was a decline of 52.9 billion. Again, Kingman was, 52.9%. Kingman had a decline of 13.5%, so that it was about a 4% or 4 times higher decline in the state versus in Kingman. These are the North American industrial classification systems in the travel industry. So that's, if you have it in your packet and you want to know what were they looking at when they were trying to figure out what the direct spending decreases were, this is the sectors that they were looking at. Kingman's overnight volume. So this kind of gets a little bit into the weeds. Once again, it's valuable for us looking at when people are coming in, what are they spending their money on. This first column, this is the expenditure of overnight visitors in 2020 specifically. The gold is per person and the blue is per party. So you can see how many days people were staying, an average of 2.8 days, an average party size of 2.8, but it also breaks down by how many are staying in a private home, hotel, motel, or other night accommodations. The second chart is looking at trips specifically. So 61% of all overnight person trips were at a hotel, motel, or short-term rental. That's really good. We want to see a higher percentage of people actually paying to overnight in Kingman. That's where we're generating some bed tax revenue. The gold represents the people trips, declined by 13.6%, and the blue represents the party trips from 2019 to 2020, declined by 19.5%. So that indicates we had less parties, but we actually had larger party sizes. So there were larger groups, families that were traveling, trying to vacation during the COVID-19 as a family group, and less business travelers. Looking forward, we don't have, I'm just going to go through, there's glossary, there's not a whole lot of more information, but we are looking forward to seeing if they're going to offer this study again next year. We can look at the impact in 2021. I do know, looking at our hotel data that we collect, we have about a 15.9% increase in demand year over year, 2020 to 2021. So we are seeing things pick back up. It's not just the demand that's picking back up, we're also seeing room rates pick back up. So overall, our revenues are about a 37% increase from 2020 to 2021, compared to about a 32.4% decrease the year before. So we're making gains, and we are on the track to see our economies improve. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that. I wanted you to report, if you could, are you seeing any uptick in international visitors?
A slight uptick. I attended a trade show called the Go West Summit in February. That's primarily where international tour operators come in to try to work on their packages. The feedback that I received from the tour operators is they are mostly looking at individual travel packages, not groups right now, because when people are required to do the tests, if any one individual comes back positive, it really messes with the entire travel plans for that party. There are no reimbursements, so you're looking at smaller groups making travel decisions as opposed to larger families. And there's fewer internationals that are willing to get on motor coaches. We are seeing more motor coaches with domestic travelers coming through, and they're fuller versus, last year we were seeing motor coaches with maybe 8-10 people, and now we're seeing 40 plus. So that domestically, we are seeing a good, strong demand, but international is going to be a while. Even within the United States, the western side of the states, because things are more spread out, a little bit different of a cultural aspect, we're having more of a bounce back than on the eastern side. In Europe, it's even a little bit further out. Internationally, they were looking at maybe late 24, early 25 before we get back to 2019 levels.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
Question, obviously, I appreciate you reporting a little bit as far as estimates for 21. By 22, do you think we're going to be back close to 2019 levels?
So we are seeing our numbers continue to pick back up. It's difficult to parse out how much we're going to have an increase because we're not having as many group travelers. It's a lot more individual travelers. I think the domestic market's been really strong, and we've seen that pick up where our international traffic has kind of lagged. Although the international travel spender, they spend more per trip than the domestic traveler. So we may see higher numbers, but we may still see some areas where the spending is not as high as it was in 2019. I think we're going to be closer to where we were in 2019. I don't know if we'll be exactly where we were in 2022 to where we were in 2019.
Okay. Well, we appreciate that. I was talking to a fuel jobber. Obviously, my business uses a lot of fuel. And I was talking to a fuel jobber the other day, and it is amazing how Mohave County, but especially along Interstate 40, Kingman being a big chunk of that, how much fuel is sold here, which means that's traffic coming through Kingman. And so as we can learn to try to capitalize on that, that's tax dollars, all of the above. So
I know when the pandemic was first setting in, communities that were along interstates were faring much better than those that were further from interstates. So that has been a bit of a buffer for Kingman. Having that traffic that's coming through, it's been a lifeblood, I think, for us. So we've seen less declines, and I think part of that you could see what was happening in the state, in the state trends and the Kingman trends. Kingman didn't have as deep cuts in 2019 as did the state as a whole because so much of the state is rural.
yeah, we appreciate you pointing that out. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item C, 5C, City Boards and Commissions Rules Revisions.
That would be me, sir.
Yes.
And Annie's going to run the slideshow for me because I'll break whatever's up there. And I'm going to try and take some, and then I had an ink spill, so I got ink all over my fingers.
Sound like me, Carl.
Yeah, I'm going to try and take some notes just as I get some input from you folks. And the idea basically is I've been wanting to work on the city code sections that reference these boards and commissions and just try and update things, make it a little bit cleaner, and maybe try and hopefully get some input from you folks to help us address some of the issues we've been having with either attendance of these meetings or even getting folks to be on these boards and commissions. So I've got kind of a quick overview of the various boards and commissions, and then ask some questions towards the end there. And obviously, one of the most important board that we have, or commission we have, is the Planning and Zoning Commission. And that one is part of the statutory scheme to obviously review and make adjustments to our zoning code or make rulings based on some applications. There are options, and I'm not recommending that the city council assume those roles, but I just want to let you know those options are available. Hearing officers are available as well. Currently, the board's at 7 members. By statute, it needs to be 5 or 7. Staff really suggests we just leave it at 7 members. We think that's a good fit. It allows a broader scope of the community to participate. I would hate to reduce that down to 5. I don't think that's necessary, and I don't think we have issues with the Planning and Zoning Commission on retention and recruitment for that. The Board of Adjustment, it meets as needed, and this one is basically when they're there to review appeals to the zoning administrator's decisions, looking at variances and other things that people have to do when they're having problems with their zoning. It's a quasi-judicial body, meaning that it's basically almost a trial in a sense, where the zoning board will make an actual decision that's a binding decision, and they can appeal that to the superior court if they need to, but they're going to take evidence. So basically, they're a group of individuals that have some understanding of that particular field. We think it's good that we currently have 5 board members. We think that's the right number of membership. And I don't think there's any suggestions of any changes we want to do with that either. And I kind of want to hit between this and then going back to, you can change it. That's with zoning. The zoning board has to be city residents. It cannot be non-city residents. And the Board of Adjustment and then going to the Board of Appeals is the same way. Those are going to be residents that are basically impacted by these decisions. The Board of Appeals is more of addressing building issues. So if there's questions on the building code, that's where those appeals go to. Again, it's another quasi-judicial body. Again, it's also a 5-member board. And we suggest that the Board of Appeals stays where it's at. The Heritage Preservation Commission, if we all remember, we renamed it from historical. It's part of, well, it's an advisory body to the mayor and council regarding historic preservation in the city of Kingman. Right now, it has 5 members, and we think that's a good position for it. There is some potential, if the council would be interested in folding some of those duties into P&Z, if we're looking at reducing the number of boards or commissions. If we were to do something along that line, it would require some changes of the zoning code, but we think there's the possibility that could happen if the council's interested in moving that direction. And unless you have questions now, we can kind of talk about what I'm asking at the end. Clean City Commission, they recommend refuse and environmental management policies to the City Council to ensure that all clean city activities follow a common purpose. They are currently at 7 members, and I believe staff has spoken to those folks, and they would agree that a 5-member commission probably would be an appropriate change. And I believe all of the boards and commissions, but for P&Z, all were basically on board with moving from 7 to 5. Economic Development Advisory Commission, currently at 7. Obviously, they provide advice and guidance on the economic development strategies and plans. The Parks Department, basically the same thing. They're currently 7. They're willing to go to 5, and they provide policy regarding our parks, aquatics, recreation, and the golf course. The airport, again, the Airport Commission, same thing. There's currently 7. They're more than willing to go to 5, and they provide assistance in establishing and maintaining policies out to the airport. The Transit Advisory Commission is one that's recommended, or not recommended, it's required by the Arizona Department of Transportation. It's basically CART. I think a lot of their CART approval processes flow through that particular program. There's currently at 5. There's no recommendation for any changes with those folks. The Youth Advisory Commission is basically defunct. We haven't had one operating for probably a few years. And part of the issue with this, and I guess the staff is looking at, seeing if council's interested in disbanding this commission through our ordinances, and then allow the staff to create something a little more out of the manager's office potentially to be a more sustainable group. And part of the reasons is when you're board or commission, you have to comply with the open meeting law, conflict of interest laws, and one that's hard to keep kids who are all going to school and potentially talking about the issues. And not like the Attorney General's office is going to come down on them or anything, but we want to try and promote good governance, good civics, and want to make sure they're complying with whatever they need to do. The thought is if we take this out of an official commission capacity, we can give children or give the youth that ability to participate in some kind of activity or function that may be a little more meaningful and a little not looser, but ability to be a little more free in their discussions and their activities, so it's not quite restrained by statute. The Municipal Utilities Commission currently is at 7 members. I believe they're willing to go down to 5. Again, they deal with our utility code, dealing with water, sewer, and sanitation, or solid waste now. We have a personnel board, which I don't even know if we have members on our personnel board, but that's basically to hear appeals to grievances folks that are employees. The idea is, our recommendation is to disband this board and utilize a hearing officer, and that's basically the process that we've planning on using if an incident has come up that we need to. And the idea of using a hearing officer is you're going to hire somebody or bring somebody in for a hearing officer that's well-versed in employment law and dealing with the issues that can arise in this, because litigation in employment is an issue that we always have to be concerned about, and we've had some of those kind of cases make it to the courts. So that's our recommendation on the Personnel Board. The Historic Design and Review Board was basically removed during the update of the zoning code. We have two here. It's the Industrial Development Board and the Municipal Property Corporation. They're both very similar. They are independent bodies where you would appoint a membership that kind of operate outside the scope of the city. It's a potential funding mechanism for issuing bonds for development. Those bonds would be guaranteed by our revenues, but the idea is it doesn't impact our debt limit. Both of these are non-functioning at this point. There have been no corporate filings since 2000, and one of the two, and I don't remember which one, had been used to pay the bonds for the expansion of the golf course, and that was paid off, I think, in 2007. I think it was a Municipal Property Corporation. We have a local public safety personnel retirement board. This is another one required by statute. It's basically, again, another independent board that deals with public safety, law enforcement, and the fire services. It deals with their retirement issues, medical, retirement, medical, basically some medical and death benefits. I think the mayor's on the board, as well as members of the citizens that are generally knowledgeable of either fire services or law enforcement services. So what I did is I looked around at some other municipalities just to see what they had done. So one of the things I saw was generally membership to the boards and commissions were restricted to residents. It seemed like that was most of them. There are a few that did allow non-citizens. And generally, if they allowed non-citizens of the city, it was if the particular individual had some specific skill set that was really needed for that board. I see the term length going from 2 to 4 years. I believe ours are, if they're not all 3, they're roughly 3. I think we should standardize. I would almost recommend that we just jump to 4 across the board, just make it a little bit simpler. There are some municipalities that restrict or do term limits, and that's an option that's available for council. And then when it said some have many boards and commissions while there's limited, what I'm noting with that is a broad number of boards. So there's a few entities that just seem to have a board for everything, and then there's some cities that have very few. Just kind of an observation for council. So my questions, recommendations is to reduce from 7 members to 5 every board or commission short of the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Heritage Preservation Commission could probably be picked up. Their duties could be picked up by P&Z, and that's something we can explore. And I did talk to staff at the zoning department. We haven't gotten too far involved because I don't know council's direction with that. The Youth Advisory Commission should be disbanded and then allow staff to create a more sustainable solution. A hearing officer is much better suited for personnel hearings because of the legal complexities. We are asking, whether regarding residency requirements, term lengths, and potential term limits. And then the final one is, I'm throwing this out there, is that there's a potential if you wanted to disband 1 or more commissions in favor of a quarterly plus or minus stakeholder meetings. And the idea is we have a large number of boards and commissions. They do take up a lot of staff resources. We have problems with recruitment on some of these boards and commissions, and sometimes they may struggle to find a purpose So the idea is having a quarterly stakeholder meeting would be, one, you're getting outside of the open meeting law requirement, you're having a better free flow requirement, and if you have master plans, we have an economic development master plan, a parks or master plan, airport master plan, there may be the ability to utilize those master plans and have these stakeholder meetings and having discussions with those people that are most affected by it to provide input and maybe guidance and direction. So I think that's the real quick, hopefully quick set of informations that I would like to present to you folks.
Okay. Well, obviously, Carl, our city attorney, we would like to thank you for the report and input. I know Clean City Commission, for example, I've attended for years, and my wife has too, off and on. And I know that commission, for example, is one of those few commissions that is comprised of non-city residents, and sort of represents the greater Kingman area, which, you know, we do have as far as keeping the community cleaner, we do have that problem as far as overall. So I see what you're getting at.
And regarding the residency, we have a few, and it's going to be like Clean City, Economic Development, the airport, there's a couple others, that parks, that allow non-residents. And I believe out of 7 membership, there can be 2. So there is the allowance currently for that. And again, not advocating either way, which what council would like to do.
Right.
The options are there.
Just observation. So if a lot of those boards were reduced down to 5, what would that residency, for example, if we wanted to keep that residency?
I would think your ratio would be maybe 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Council members, any comments?
Vice Mayor,
Yes, Mayor Miles first.
I would just suggest that if they are reduced, that it's done in parallel with the ending of certain term limits so that people, so we're not picking and choosing who stays and who leaves. I know we've done that before, I think, for the airport. It's just not the best way to do it, I thought. It was in that case, I know why we did it, but for these, I wouldn't. I am in favor of disbanding the Youth Commission because it has not operated successfully for years. And if there's an alternative that could give more flexibility, I think that we need youth participating as a adjunct to the city. And so if there's a better idea, I'd love to see it come forth. And as far as the Heritage Preservation Commission going into planning and zoning, I'd have to see more information probably, but on the face of it, just based on the experience we just had in the process of the new development for the kind of the Airbnb development, having that heritage preservation after P&Z, I think was confusing and after council, I think. So this would be something I'd be very interested in seeing brought forward as an option. So I think those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Miles. Councilwoman Samley.
Yes, so I fall in line with the mayor on the Youth Advisory Commission. I'd like to see that brought back into staff. And I'd love to see what they come up with because I feel like our youth needs to have a voice in our government and it would be interesting to hear that perspective. My question is, are there currently issues getting people to apply, getting people from the city? Like, what brought this about? So for those that are watching and listening, can you give us some background?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So the issue with boards and commissions have been really both of those items. We are not getting people that are willing to sign up and participate, and then those that are not showing up. And so as an example, and it's going to feel like we're picking on one, and I don't mean to, but the Heritage Preservation Commission went for, I think, 3 straight meetings without a majority to be able to hold the meeting. Now, recently, that changed, but it has been pretty much across the board for all of the boards and commissions where meetings have been canceled due to lack of members to be able to hold them. And I'll point out that even in the Planning Commission, as important as the Planning Commission, you've seen a number of decisions come to the council where it was 4-0, where they had just enough to hold the meeting. And obviously, in an important board or commission as the Planning Commission, you want to have as much input as you possibly can, and those 7 members you want to hear from. And then what you end up with is people that are planning on watching meetings where we're canceling them because not enough people. The confidence in them goes way down. Prep, the team prep to put those on still had to happen, and then the meeting's canceled. So that's really, it's twofold. Volunteerism throughout this country, and it's affecting Kingman as well, is way down. So applications aren't coming in. I will tell you that our Citizen Academy, we spend some time talking about this, and we've had a number of participants in that have they didn't know, or they're like, oh, I want to be involved. So, we are taking steps to encourage people to participate, but it's just the world we live in. People just don't seem to be willing to give us the time. And when they commit to it, I mean, we've had, I'm sorry to say this, but we've had commission members that have been appointed and never shown up to a meeting. So.
Well, and I had some comment too, as to, since we're in the process of reworking some things, maybe there could be some kind of education component when you become a commissioner, as far as like an orientation or what it means to sit on that. I don't know if there's something in place. I can tell you I'm the liaison to the Economic Development Advisory Commission, and we sit through a meeting, all the commissioners sit through a meeting just to hear reports. So if that's not something that you're interested in, just listening to reports, and there's really not a lot of action because you are following that strategic plan and you're making sure that those folks are staying on task and, those things are moving forward, if that's not something that you're interested in and you think that it's economic development and you're going to be, being introduced to businesses coming in or maybe taking people on tours or, things like that, that needs to be communicated up front, that there are some commissions that are more action oriented and there are some that are more advisory. And so I'd like to see that. I'm in favor of reducing it if we're having issues getting people to attend meetings and commit, but I'm also very interested in setting that expectation up front. So if that could be, but also the residency, I do think it needs to be a good representation of the citizens of Kingman. So, if we do go to commissions that are 5-member commissions, we need to seek out our citizens of the city first. I understand Vice Mayor's comments about the Clean City Commission. We need to be in partnership with the county, but we need to seek out those individuals that are living in the city, proactively and try to limit the amount of commission members that we have that are non-residents.
Well, and I just completely agree with that. And the citizen survey that we just presented to you are people that live inside the city limits, right? So and there's, beautification, if we want to look at what these commissions are doing and the importance of what they're looking at, obviously they're going to be a big part of changing how people view the natural environment and how clean or not clean this community is. And the beautification process and the policies around those are extremely important, clearly, to our citizens.
Well, thank you for those comments. Any other comments from council members?
Yeah, Vice Mayor,
Yes, Councilwoman Staley.
I do have a couple questions, or I'm sorry, I have a couple comments. I think that our commissions are really, really important. I hate to see them cut way back to a point where they feel like they're not adding to the process or being, our citizens aren't being heard. So my first concern about going from 5 to 7 is that, as Kingman grows, certainly we should be able to get more people, especially as, things are getting better with the pandemic. And when I first started on council, we would have multiple applicants for just 1 or 2 positions. We've just seen that go down in the last few years. So I'd like to, personally, I think we should hold out and keep it at 7, but that we should do a better job of promoting these openings. Our PIO should, be making some kind of a release when we have an opening, and what does that commission do? We could also, be putting something in the Kingman Daily Miner about the city's commissions, which ones have openings and how to apply. I think a lot of people, and especially people who have just moved here, just don't know how to get involved in these commissions. So I'd like to see us give it a better try before we just cut down to 5. Another concern I have about going to a smaller commission is that if you do have somebody who doesn't show up, they're sick or something, I'm thinking specifically of P&Z. If you've got 1 or 2 people out and the commission's only got 5, you can't have just 3 people voting on something that important. So I would really like us to see it at 7, just for multiple reasons. And then, a few years ago, we did have an annual meeting with all of our commissioners, and I thought it was a really great event. It was really positive. They were able to get into groups. They were able to look at the citizen survey, make some goals for the year, that way that they could be more proactive and united in what they wanted to do with their commission. It was a great training session. I know Annie gave, some information about open meeting laws and that kind of thing. And so I feel like a few hours once a year with all our commissions getting together is a really worthwhile event. And it helps to strengthen the commissions and make them able to serve our city better. And then the last thing is just on the whether or not you should live in the city limits to serve. I think that should be changed so that unless we cannot fill a spot with a Kingman citizen, that we should not be letting people who live outside of the city limits serve on our commission, except for the airport and industrial park. And I would make that exception because that is in the county and it does affect county residents. So I don't mind the 1 or 2 county residents serving on our city commission, but otherwise, if you don't live in the city, I don't think you should be serving on our commissions. And that is all.
Thank you for those comments. I echo some of those thoughts too, Councilwoman Staley, so I appreciate you bringing that up. I know I was thinking during this whole presentation too, that while our population has increased, that we would hope that we would get better participation. But I know Manager Foggin, you mentioned that volunteerism is down across the country, partially because of what we've just been going through in this whole COVID mess. Anyway.
And I would just note that we have made those attempts at the outreach. I think the PIO has done that, as well as staff members that run those commissions or work with those commissions frequently reach out to individuals to try and beg them to get onto these boards, and they're still struggling.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Walker.
Yeah, I personally would be okay with going from 7 to 5 on these commissions if we're having problems getting a quorum to the meeting. On the youth commission, I would suggest let's kick that back to the manager's office, make that a different style of group. And maybe on the heritage commission, maybe that would be one to go to a stakeholders meeting.
Well, actually, the heritage are actually required to make some decisions.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, I appreciate Councilor Walker bringing up the quarterly stakeholder meetings. So we're starting to see success in other communities with these. And it basically allows people to make some time. They're not feeling like they have to be at every meeting. And I will say that, as an example, our neighbor, Lake Havasu, is having some really great success with these quarterly stakeholder meetings. Matter of fact, their airport manager started one. They call them quarterly terminal talks. Now, I got to question the title of that, but they're getting good participation, and they're having really good conversations about improvements, taking feedback, being able to answer questions, and this seems to be kind of a trend in what's happening, because you get people that are interested, that maybe want to come to one and can't come to 4 of them a year. And so that is something that we will be exploring over this next year, because we believe that this is what people are willing to give time on, and when they're not interested, they don't have to give their time. So I appreciate you bringing that up. But yeah, heritage preservation, they do have some responsibility. Now, I will say that the commission, the heritage preservation, stepped up. There was a decision, the mayor pointed that out with regards to the Airbnb Airstream project, and they did show up and help make a decision to move that forward. But prior to that, there had been, I think, 3 meetings in a row where we had not had enough people to participate. So there is that piece as well. So.
Thank you, Manager Fagan. So I guess, Manager Fagan and Mr. Cooper, you have some work to do on this and to present it back to council.
I think I have some answers.
Vice Mayor,
Yes, Mayor.
I'm going to make another comment, but this is really for Mr. Cooper. As you're going through this, which I'm very thankful, you're going through all of these commissions to bring them up to date. Would you please turn all these common councils into city council? I've seen even in, the language that you're reflecting in this one, this presentation, there's a mix of city council, common council, and some are capitalized, some aren't. So let's get that a consistent city council, please.
So we would
And,
go against state statute? Is that, because state statute calls common council, but I have no problem with just calling it the
Well,
council.
one of them had city council.
What's that?
In it tonight, well, anyway.
I'm sure in some of my places I did note city council. I agree, I was a little
All right,
haphazard.
okay, well, if consistency is possible, then I would suggest it. And the only other thing is to consider on the commissions, and this was considered years ago, special expertise. When we're talking about being in the city of Kingman or outside of it, I so agree that we need the representation from the city residents. And yet there are times when that special expertise for a certain commission might benefit the commission itself. And so that's just something to factor in as we think about this, the participation of residents and non-residents. I think that's why historically we've allowed 1 or 2 to come from outside the city, and looking for that, the opportunities for special expertise. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Miles. Okay, I think moving on, I think we've discussed it. Manager Fagan and Mr. Cooper, we will wait to hear from you. Item 5D, Rancho Santa Fe TI update. Manager Fagan?
Yes, thank you, Vice Mayor. A couple meetings ago, Councilor Walker had asked if we would cover this in a department report. Happy to do that. Actually, the report is pretty simple. I want to just tell you what the developer KDP manager is doing and then what the city is doing. So the KDP manager, obviously our partner in the development agreement, they're working on 3 major things right now. The first is they continue to work on the flood control project, the facility that they had proposed, which basically is a large detention basin, and then the drainage system that used to be Rattlesnake Wash is actually being relocated and will be sized to handle a 10-year event, a storm event. That's, as you can imagine, a fairly large change and work that's being done. That is progressing. AECOM, the engineering firm that had actually done the design for the TI and the roadway itself, is doing that project, and that is progressing. There was a change order as part of that project that it was determined that, and this is the next piece of the thing that the developer is working on, and that is the layout of all the infrastructure. So KDP manager wants to have their sewer, water lines. I don't know how much of the gas and electric's part of that, but I know our infrastructure is a big part of that. They want to have that in place, and they want to know where that's going to be so they're not tearing up roads later. I think a wise decision. That change order was done or asked for at the end of December. Price was given to the developer first part of January. Not exactly sure where KDP and AECOM are on the sewer and water line not relocation, but the location process, but that is something that they want to do in conjunction with what they're doing. The third thing, and one of the biggest things, is I met with Bill today, so we're meeting every 2 weeks to discuss the process and timing, is that they are working on their financing. So we actually received their estoppel certificate, which is being reviewed right now. That is through the bank to ensure that none of the development agreement has changed for either party. Pretty important. And so they are working on their letter of credit. They have identified a financial institution in which to do that financing through. It's the National Bank of Arizona, I believe is a subsidiary of Zions Bank. So pretty substantial bank. You know, the one thing that we would obviously worry about is if they went and tried to do this with an unknown bank or a less powerful bank. So that's progressing. For the city's part in this, obviously we are a little bit in the back seat, but we are doing the work necessary in the change to the flood control. That expanded the width of our easement across our property, and also the extension of the sewer lines were necessary. So we are we should receive our airport layout plan approval from FAA here in the next week or so. And that basically has the FAA acknowledging that the road, sewer, and the drainage system does not interfere with aeronautic activity, which is a huge part of this process. And then the other piece that we're working on is the environmental assessment as required with the change in the road width and the sewer. That process we have engaged AECOM to do that work for us, and we don't expect that to delay the project at all, but that will put basically to rest the airport layout plan. Will establish the road through our property, and the environmental assessment will basically release those properties for development. So that's where we are with Rancho. It is progressing, not as fast as we would like, but it's a pretty complex program or project, and the programs that go with that are moving. So that's what I have for Rancho.
Okay, thank you, Manager Froggen. I have a question.
Yes.
Timeline, what are we looking at now? I know that is what I think is all as council members we are asked.
Yeah, and again, it continues to be where we are going to be a little bit more careful about giving specific times
Sure.
because we continue to kind of get burned on that. We are still in really not moving. We're not able to move our financing forward until we have the irrevocable letter of credit from the developer. That's where we are. Where they have indicated they are is that the partnership or the limited liability corporation has the partners in place, the agreements in place to get the financing. So like I said, the Estapo certificate is a big portion of that. The bank's requiring that. The bank is also currently evaluating to make sure that they have all of their easements and right-of-ways in place to do the project. So I would say that in talking with Bill, that second quarter of this year is where we expect to have the financing moving forward at this point, based on his report.
So just throwing this out there. So breaking ground, are we looking at fourth quarter, first quarter next year, second quarter? I mean, I know once again, we cannot be held to this. It's just sort of a.
If it's really the irrevocable letter of credit. If I get the irrevocable letter of credit in the second quarter, it is really it's conceivable to have the financing in place and have the TI work start by the fourth quarter.
Okay. That's promising.
Yeah. No, again, I think the message is that the project is moving forward. The developer is spending money, and the engineering, as I said before, is complicated, and having them do a large change order to look at the infrastructure is important. So.
Okay. Councilman Walker.
Yeah, question about the change order. Does that affect the city's contribution to
Nope.
the project?
No, this is, our contribution to the flood control system is 3.5 million, and that does not change.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, good question.
Other council questions or comments? Okay.
Okay.
Hearing none, we'll move on.
All right, we'll do this once in a while.
Great. 5E, 1,800 acre land release update.
Yes, well, I was going to tackle this, but then I decided that I'd pick on somebody else. So I asked Jack Plenty, who is actually, I would say, championing this process with his team, and so I thought it would be appropriate to have Jack let you know where we are, which is also progressing. So Jack, please.
Thank you, Manager Foggen. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council. So I'll cover a couple of these steps fairly quick, because I'm sure you guys have heard them, but this project, just to highlight, is interconnected but not connected with the Rancho project. You know, one goes through them, but they're separate projects as far as the FAA is concerned, and we need to maintain that independent utility between those two. So the first step in this is submitting the 163 request. We get a determination back from FAA. When they review that, they look at a couple things, make sure, again, as Mr. Foggen indicated, that we're not affecting adversely the safety of people on the ground, aircraft, or the movement of vehicles to and from. As well, they're also making sure that we're not adversely impacting the previous federal investments that were the airfield. They don't want us to, we want to get the best property value we can out of that area. So the 163 came back from FAA. It determined that a land release and to release those federal obligations so we can use that property outside of aeronautical use, and an environmental assessment was needed. So keep in mind, this is a pretty complex project in and of its own, outside of Rancho, just because of the scope and the size of it. So some of the comments that came back from FAA weren't really anticipated, and mainly because they're asking for a scope or a detail of what the airport is going to look like, the industrial park, that we would have assumed would have occurred in the development planning side. And so it's not a total blow to our project. And one thing that's important to highlight, you have those two components. You have the land release component, and then you have the development planning component. So the development planning is going to be pretty complex because there's a lot of stakeholders in it. We got Mohave County, and that's multiple divisions. They're engineering, public works, planning and zoning, economic development. We're going to have utilities, not only city utilities. We're also going to have gas, power, telco. Everything needs to be detailed for FAA. So those two projects are occurring simultaneously. What we expected would have been successive. And so it's going to take a little bit of time working through with those stakeholders and things, but the overall scope and time frame of what the project would have happened is still intended to be the same and anticipated to be the same. So the important part of that is the FAA comments that were received back for the land release, we're still addressing those currently. We're actually in the current scope of services with Kaufman Associates that's doing the land release. There's some things that we're working through flood control related. That was one of the major topics with FAA. So we're going through those and addressing those items that we can right now, and then the additional information that's needed that'll be generated through the development planning will be added to that EA, and that'll be submitted. So most likely what you'll see is the EA go in, the land release is happening while we're finishing the last little bit of the development planning, the coordination with the county. Because keep in mind, again, outside of just the physical improvements like roadway and utilities, we're also looking at CCRs, zoning changes, all those things to really develop and make this industrial park exactly what the city and the county is intending it to be, you know, for the economic impact and benefit to the community. Excuse me. So where we are, I kind of touched on that a little bit. We're addressing a lot of those issues currently, but there's some that will receive information back through the development planning side. Again, some important notes to close with, and then I can take some questions if you have them, is we have selected a design team or planning team as part of the development phase. So we put out a request for qualifications. Looks like a good team. We're in negotiations right now and getting a scope and fee developed for that, along with the stakeholders. So we want to involve those different stakeholders, the county, us, and make sure that we capture everything in the scope along with the FAA to try and expedite this and get it done as quickly as we can. The FAA, excuse me, the FAA still allows us to market this property. The caveat to that is we need to market based on aviation-related purposes. So it's not that we can't be doing anything on it now. We're trying to release those obligations to where we can market it for other purposes, but we still have the option to market for aviation-related. Again, the project time frame between the two, I don't want to call them phases, but the two portions or processes to finish out the planning is still anticipated to remain the same. And with that, I'll see if I can answer any questions.
Thanks, Jack. Thank you, Jack. Any questions or comments from council? Yes, Councilwoman Salmon.
So you keep talking about the time frame. The time frame's not going to be different. What's the time frame?
So I can't give you an exact answer on that, and I apologize. And part of that is because that's detailed in that scope. And we have a pretty good outline. We've been working on this, anticipating this phase of planning required. Not necessarily at this particular time. The reason, I guess that's one thing I missed in my notes, even though I was staring at them, is one of the things that was considered while we were leading into this. One, we didn't expect that level of detail from the FAA. This is the largest land release ever completed. So there are airports that have less acreage as a total than we're asking for to be released from our airport. So it's a significant ask, and you know the FAA is looking for a good level of detail to make an educated recommendation when moving that forward. So
just not to interrupt you, but to interrupt you. So are we looking at, and I'm not going to hold you to a date, are we looking at 3 months? Are we looking at 6 months? Are we going to be breaking ground on the Rancho Santa Fe TI and this is still going on? Can you paint that picture for me?
I can, but if you'd ever seen any of my art projects, that was not my highest grade. I did really well in PE and lunch, so, and I won't skirt around that. So I did talk to them them being the design team, they talked to the groups inside of there and the coordination, and just the portion for the development planning on the preliminary scope that we provided them, we're looking at around 8 months. And so obviously there's a lot of coordination that goes in that. Like I say, there's a lot of stakeholders and a lot that has to be done along with this to make that happen. So that timeline is subject to change. To look at the two projects, Rancho is the 163 and everything that was done, that's being expedited to make sure that's happening. But both of these projects are moving along at the same pace at the moment.
So you said the development is going to be 8 months? The development plan could be up to 8 months?
Correct.
So you called it an EU that's going to be submitted, goes in first?
EA.
EA?
Yeah, so
Okay.
there's, you got two portions of
Right.
projects, and I'm probably not detailing it well. So you have the land release portion, which requires the environmental assessment, and then we have the development planning. The environmental assessment is asking some of those details from the development planning. So you will see, most likely what you'll see is we'll submit the EA and the land release documents, because there's a lengthy posting period with FAA. A lot of these timeframes that you're going to see when you look at our schedules are the timeframes required by NEPA. So when you're looking at the national, I should know it other than a acronym, but the National Environmental Protection Act is what details those timeframes, and they're very specific and very detailed in those timings. So when you look at our project schedules, a significant portion of those schedules is because of the NEPA requirements.
So I would just say that our goal, because we knew this was going to be 2 phases all along, and Jack, you're right to use 2 phases because it really
Okay.
is 2 phases.
I wasn't sure if we're on plan
Yeah.
A, C,
No, it's
2, or 4.
It's 2 phases. It was the release, and then we had to have the plan in which it was going to develop. FAA said, we want to see that plan, when originally it was going to be a rough plan that is actually provided in the airport master plan. We pointed out to the FAA that they approved the airport master plan, in which they approved the general use of the property as laid out in that plan, and they said, nice try. So our goal and our effort is to have both phases done by end of calendar year, is what our goal is. Now, again, the scoping that's going to be provided by the consultant will shine a better light on that, but that has been our goal, is to have this all done by the December 31st. We'll see how far off we are on that, but that has been what we're asking the consultant to consider. And we've asked the FAA to move this when it comes to their review. Now, as Jack said, there's some timing things that we just have no ability to change. But because we're doing this at the same time, there's some review stuff that can be sent in and reviewed that we don't have to get our development plan done and then wait for. So there's going to be some opportunity to move through the program at the pace that the consultant can handle, and what we can turn around, and what the FAA review can turn around. So that continues to be our goal. Again, when we get the scoping done, obviously we'll share if it's a different timing, then we'll share that with you.
Yeah.
The other piece I will just point out to you is the thing that the FAA it's been very difficult for them to get their arms around this large project. And it's one of the reasons why they're so concerned about it is, and a wise man told me this, who worked for me at one time and still is on consulting services with us, and that is, this 1,800 acres is the lifeblood for the airport. And the FAA wants to make sure that we have ongoing revenue to support the airport forever. And so they don't want to release 1,800 acres for us just to sell off, because it is a huge boom when we sell 200 acres to somebody and the city brings in a whole millions of dollars. You got to remember, that's one-time money, and when it's gone, it's gone. And so in going through this process, you're going to see land that's designated for lease only, and there'll be aeronautic activity areas where, and businesses that work in aeronautics are used to this, where they build a building and lease the property that it sits on. That's not an unusual thing. They're used to it. That ongoing lease revenue is how the day-to-day operations of the airport occur. And so it's frustrating. The FAA can be very frustrating, but at the same time, there is some method to their madness on this. So, and our consultant understands that and will be presenting a design that addresses that so that it makes it easier for the FAA to approve it. Because if we just showed up and said, we want you to release 1,800 acres and we want you to let us sell it to whoever, and we'll be done, once we sell the 1,800 acres, we're done. That's not gonna fit with their program, so.
Well, and I appreciate you putting in the comments the posting times, because it's not all us doing, working on things. I mean, there's mandatory posting times, which delays the project out. So I think that's important for the public to know as well.
It is.
That we're not dragging, or, it's not taking, it's a mandatory, it's statute, so, yeah.
And so those are federally required. And so one of the important things, we didn't want to go do all the development planning and spend a bunch of money without the FAA committing to the land release. And we have their comments back. It wasn't, no, this ain't happening. Here's the things you need to make this happen. So FAA has committed to making this project happen. Now it's up to us to gather that information and that detail that they need to provide an EA that makes them comfortable and fits everything within NEPA for them to actually be able to recommend that release of the land or those federal obligations. So while we anticipated doing it second half, we have a commitment from the FAA that, yeah, this can happen. And so now we can bring that planning at a reasonable stage without the risk of doing a bunch of work and spending a bunch of money and them come back and say no.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Appreciate it. That is the end of our department reports. Once again, we'd like to thank all city staff and Manager Foggin for all the reports and information that is shared with us. And hopefully, as a council, we learn more, and our citizens who are watching, because we all get these questions, so we appreciate that. Number 6, announcements by mayor, council members, and city manager. Manager Foggin.
I currently have no announcements.
You've done a lot of talking already tonight.
Yeah, I'm going to just shut up.
Councilman Walker. Councilwoman Samley.
I always have something to say. I wanted to just let the public know that I attended the Bash's re-grand opening, and I was so excited. That happened on March the 2nd, to see that shopping center. That whole center is just hustling and bustling, and Bash is reinvesting in our community. It's huge. It's beautiful in there. So if you haven't had a chance to see it, please stop in and see it. And they've been in our community for a very long time, and they keep reinvesting and reinvesting and reinvesting. So I was very happy to meet some of their people and see the remodel. It's beautiful in there. So.
Good comment. Thank you. I agree. Councilwoman Staley.
No announcements this evening.
Okay, thank you. I myself, once again, I did want to comment actually, but back in the city boards and commissions, but I just wanted to thank again all the citizens of our city who participate on it and serve on our commissions. Because sometimes it can be difficult being able to serve, but we do recognize you and we appreciate you and thank you. I have no other announcements. Mayor Miles.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I really have no announcements other than to thank you, Vice Mayor, because you have been so terrific, and everything that I've asked you to do, because I've been able to attend things right now other than in Zoom and by email. I really appreciate how willing you are to get out there and just be a part of everything that's going on in the city. So thank you very much. Thank you to the whole council, actually, for you're just, from my perspective, watching you on Zoom, it's so, it's really good to see the interaction, the comments, and from a different perspective, actually. So thank you all.
Thank you. Item number 7, in council requests for future reports and updates. Okay, hearing no requests, can I have a motion to dismiss, to adjourn? All in favor, say aye, right? Aye, thank you.
Aye.
Once again, thanks everybody for being here tonight.